Good evening and welcome to the Impact Show with your host Samuel I Can Win Kimwin. Guys, I'm ready for today's show and I hope you are ready too. Just before we get straight into the show, let me know in the chat if you can hear me perfectly. Let me know in the chat if you are ready to go. Okay, guys, it's a great pleasure to be here with you guys. I'm going to jump straight into our disclaimer. Again, I'm probably going to give a big thank you again today. Then we're going to jump straight into the news. Then we're going to open up the phone line. So today's show is going to be jam-packed. But let me know in the chat. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Let me know in the chat if you are ready to go. So just quick comment, Samuel, I can hear you. Quick comment, Samuel, I am ready to go. Samuel, I can hear you. Samuel, I am ready to go. Let me know in the chat. I got Yogesh already. Yes, ready. Have my questions ready. Absolutely fantastic. I like that. All right. Yogesh is prepared. And I hope everybody else is prepared with your notepads and your pens and every other piece of artillery that you need to be able to go on today's Impact Show. But again, okay. Excellent. So just let me know if you are ready to go and we will jump straight into tonight's show. Yogesh just said here, YouTube can hear, but not sure Facebook. The Facebook group, we were considering whether we was even going to stream to Facebook because, last week, Facebook showed YouTube up. Okay, loud and clear, sir. Ready to go. I love that. Thank you ever so much, also Kimwin. Guys, listen, if you are ready to go, let me know in the chat you're ready to go. Don't just allow Yogesh and Osa to be the only people in the chat saying they're ready to go. Facebook, the community there as well. If you are ready to go, let me know in the Facebook community if you are ready to go. Tonight's live show, we've got a lot of value. Can hear you loud and clear. Thank you ever so much, Mrs. I Can Win. We are ready to go on tonight's show. So, without further ado, let me just jump in first and foremost by reading out our disclaimer. And the moment after we've read out our disclaimer, we're going to jump straight into tonight's show and straight into the value. Now, first and foremost, one of the things we want to share with you is all information that is provided and results that are given are based on other people's results. They are exemplary. They may not necessarily be the results you are able to achieve if you are not doing what the people we're talking about are doing. Now, each person's results may vary or differ. Results are based on consistent strategies being employed and applied, and we advise that you always seek legal and financial advice from a qualified professional. So guys, with the housekeeping out of the way, first thing I want to say to every single person who's watching tonight, both those of you who are watching right now on the live show and those of you who are going to be watching this as a replay, is a great big thank you. Our YouTube channel has continued to grow from last week to this week. I think we've added an additional 7 subscribers. So guys, every subscriber counts. We have just got a whole bunch of appreciation for the whole community who are jumping out and getting involved in what we're doing. So a great big thank you to you guys helping us hit our benchmarks. And like I said, our goal is to hit 1,000 subscribers. So if you haven't hit subscribe yet, why not hit subscribe? And why not hit subscribe, saying it clearly, and become a part of our community, become a part of what we're doing, answering people's questions in the property space, helping people move forward, etc, etc, etc. So we've got London's happiest bus driver who says, Samuel, I can hear you. Thank you ever so much for your feedback. And London's happiest bus driver also said to us earlier, I'm on the move at the moment at London Bridge. So guys, it's that real. People are tuning in because they are ready to go to get value. And guys, you know what we do this show for. I'm going to share with you kind of like the intro, but everybody who's on this show right now, whether live or replay, it will do you well to understand why we're here. The reason we're here is because a number of weeks ago, this is episode 21, so this is roughly 21, 23, 24 weeks ago, I had a whole bunch of coaching clients, people that I coach in their property investment journey, reaching out to me and saying, Samuel, what do I do with the, new lockdown rules? What do I do with the pandemic rules? What do I do around, the virus and all of those things? And I basically realized that, I couldn't help everybody by answering calls and responding to Facebook Messenger messages, WhatsApp messages, our own walkie-talkie messages, etc. So what I did is I said something really, really simple. I said, you know what? This is what we're going to do. We're going to have a chat with the whole team and find a way that we can serve the community in a more efficient way. And that was effectively what we wanted to do. And the way that we came up with doing that is jumping on Facebook Live, jumping on YouTube Live. Predominantly it was YouTube, but jumping on YouTube Live on a week-to-week basis and offering value to people who needed answers for their questions. And this is what I do. I go out of my way to strategize with people and help them achieve optimal results in terms of their property journey. So this is how this show was conceived. This is how this show came out, and this is what we're doing on the show. We're just here to add value, to answer people's questions, to help them move forward. And what it's basically become, which is quite interesting, is basically become an opportunity for us to also scrutinize little bits of news, which is funny enough. And in terms of our scrutiny of news, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there that's being said by tabloids, by press, etc., about property, about the property space, about what people think, etc. And one of the things we've been able to have the great opportunity to do on the show is basically throw up some of those articles and talk about those articles and say, you know, what do you think about this? You know, and the chat right there on YouTube is created for you guys to be able to engage with one another. It's created for you guys to be able to speak to one another, share with one another. So guys, utilize the chat. As you can see, the chat is right there. Utilize the chat. Just, you know, comment, share, let people know that you're here. Tell people who you are. Tell people what you're doing in property. That chat is for the community, so feel free to utilize it. And the same to you guys on Facebook. Those of you tuning in, watching us on Facebook Live as well, do the same thing. Send a comment, let us know what you're doing in property, let us know how you're moving forward. If you've got questions, send those questions in, and let's basically help people move forward in their property journey. So what I want to do today on today's show is I want to jump straight into the news. The reason I want to jump straight into the news, I think we've got a caller who's already on, and I basically want to share with you guys something I thought was very, very interesting. Now, what I might do, I haven't done this before, what I might do is bring up the article, show you the article, let you start to think about the article as we jump into the phone lines, answer some questions, and then come back to the article after and me give you kind of like my 2 pence around the news that we're going to be sharing today. But funnily enough, the news we are going to be sharing today is a little bit different. I might not even go into the whole depth of the article. What I might do is just share with you guys the headline. So let's do that. Okay, here's the headline from the news article that I wanted to share with you guys on today's show. Okay, and hopefully you should be able to read it. It says something very, very interesting. It says house builders threatened with court action over leasehold scandal after watchdog finds troubling evidence, in quotation, of mis-selling. Now, the reason this is important is because there's recently been some interesting changes in terms of planning. And those recent changes in terms of planning may really favor these big house builders. These big house builders, these massive size, massive scale house builders may really, really be able to take advantage of these newest regulations that have actually been put in place. But I think this is another way of these new house builders being kind of warned, pre-warned, and being told, hold on a minute, listen, don't think you're just going to come in here and do whatever you want to do. We want to let you know with this little semi-slap on the wrist, which I'll go into later when we start reading the article, etc., that, guys, there's more to it than meets the eye. So this is one of the articles we will be talking about later, and I want you guys to really be thinking about the reality of what effect does this actually have on people. If the biggest house builders, the 4 biggest house builders, 5 biggest house builders in the UK are actually being, you know, scrutinized right now because apparently there is some information coming out that they have evidence, troubling evidence as it's been termed, that basically these guys are mis-selling their properties or mis-selling a specific part or component of their properties, which I'll go on to talk about in a little while in the show. I want you guys to think about this. I want you guys to be mindful about this, because this is the kind of stuff that can actually have knock-on effects on smaller scale property investors, people like yourself, people like myself, especially when we don't know what we're doing. And this is something I want to really reiterate. So there's a moral to today's kind of live show, and I'm going to share it with you right up front, and then we'll keep touching base on it as we go through today's show. But the moral of today's show, for those of you who don't know, just to give it to you, just to share it with you, the moral of today's show is do your due diligence. Okay, for those of you on the Facebook Live, do your due diligence. For those of us on the YouTube, do your due diligence, because a lot of people don't do their due diligence. A lot of people think if they just hope and pray, it will work out in the right way. And the reality is things don't work like that. So I just want to encourage you, whether you're on the Facebook Live, whether you're on the YouTube Live, whether you're watching this on a replay on Facebook or on YouTube, please, guys, be the kind of people who understand greatly that property is about doing your due diligence. It's about relationships. It's about people. It's not what many people make it out about. It's actually about a few different things. And we've got a bunch of videos on our YouTube channel sharing all of the insights, all of the keys that we've learned about property throughout our journey. And we'd like to share them with you, which is why we started our YouTube journey, and we've basically leveled up in the last 12 months, and we want to continue to help the community. Okay, so guys, let us help you by helping us in terms of moving forward. So without further ado, I think it's a great time to open the phone lines. For those of you who are ready, the phone line is now open. And like I said earlier, if you are new to the channel, let us know in the chat. Just write, "Hi guys, I'm new," and let people start to engage with you. Let the community start to engage with you. And if you haven't hit subscribe, feel free to subscribe. If you haven't hit like, hit the like button. Okay, by hitting the like button, you tell the YouTube world that this is some good content, it's of value, and it's going to help somebody. And that's what's important. We want to help some people. So let's move forward by jumping onto the phone lines and hear which callers we can help today. And I think the number's already been checked. I think we've got Yogesh on the line already. So that's fantastic. Let me just get these ready. And we should be ready to hear Yogesh. Okay, so let's hope and pray that our tech is doing even better than usual. Okay, I think our Facebook just got cut off, probably due to internet. Good evening, Yogesh. Can't seem to hear you, Yogesh, presently. Good evening, Yogesh. Okay, Yogesh, send me a message. Let me know if you can hear me. It seems as though I can't hear you presently. I'm not sure what that is about. Okay, so Yogesh can hear me perfectly. I'm not sure what's happening. I can't hear you right now. I'm going to try one more thing. Hopefully that will help. That's correct, Yogesh. I can't hear you currently, but hopefully we'll be able to sort that out. Let's just check some settings. Hi, Yogesh. If you can just try and say something now. Let's see if that works. Good evening, Yogesh. Still no audio. Let's try this. Hi, Yogesh. I can hear you now. I've just changed a few settings. Hopefully that's better.
You got me now.
I've got you 100%. All right, Yogesh. So you know the drill. Just a quick one. Are you happy for the people in the YouTube world to hear what you have to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. And you're also happy for them to hear what I will be sharing with you also, yeah?
Yeah.
Excellent. Phenomenal. So without further ado, I'm going to unmute you on the YouTube, and everyone on YouTube should be able to hear you now as well. So Yogesh, go for it. How can we help you? What is your question for today?
Okay, so I potentially have two, but the first one is, when you find a deal and you want to secure it and you don't want anyone else to, take it off you, and you want to maybe sell it to someone or do it yourself, what do you do legally or otherwise, and specifically what agreement and who does it to make sure it's secured for you? That's my question. But people say secure it, but they never really say the details behind it.
That's a great question. So I've got from admin, they've said we can hear Yogesh, but very faintly. Was you able to hear Yogesh a bit louder by the time? Okay, I've got that's better already. Excellent. All right. I did try to play with the stuff so that we can make sure we can get you properly, Yogesh. And unfortunately, our Facebook Live has been cut off. So guys, if you're on both, apologies. We're going to stay on the YouTube and we'll probably rekindle the Facebook at a later stage. Now, Yogesh has asked a fantastic question. For those of you who maybe weren't able to hear Yogesh at the beginning, Yogesh basically asked, if you are trying to secure a property deal, what do you do technically? What are the realities of basically securing a property deal? Because as Yogesh basically put it, there are a lot of people out there who talk about securing property deals, but they don't give you the actual nitty gritty. They don't give you the actual details about how to do that. So Yogesh, is that a good definition, explanation of your question, summary?
Yeah, perfect. Some people talk about option agreements, some people talk about exchange subject to, some people talk about heads of term, but
Yeah.
Who do you go to, what do you do, and who do you pay, and what do you tell them to do?
Excellent,
Yeah,
excellent, excellent. So that's a fantastic question, Yogesh. And I'm gonna I'll go into about three things in order to give you a bit of value in terms of this regard. First thing is this, and I'll just to give you some context. So just before lockdown, I was working on creating a brand new presentation. Obviously, as Yogesh knows this because I first met Yogesh at a networking event. And one of the things I do generally is I get invited to a number of networking events and different property meets across the country where I share value similar to kind of the live show, but more structured, more strategic, where I basically present, through means of slides, etc., about some of the stuff I've been doing in my business. And I was presently working just before the lockdown. I was presently working on a new presentation that I was going to start delivering this year, which I've still I haven't completed it because obviously I haven't had to complete it, but I have still been working on it, and it will be probably complete in a day or two. But basically, this presentation is called Controlling Property Using Paper. And the reason this is important in terms of context is because what I was going to do through that presentation is basically share with a community of people that whoever I'd be presenting to several different ways, several different pieces of paper effectively that you can use in order to secure property. Okay, so controlling property using paper was really a presentation which was a brainchild of mine around the ideology of how to control properties using paper. So Yogesh's question is right up the street of what we're talking about. So like I said, I'm going to give you 3 different ways you can control property using effectively what I call pieces of paper. And then at the end of that, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to share kind of for the second part of Yogesh's question in terms of who do you speak to, who do you pay, how do you get it done. So I'll go into that at the end as well. All right. So this is going to be massive value. Those of you who are watching for the first time, if you haven't been with us before, hit that like button, hit subscribe and become a part of the community. So just to jump in, first thing, one of the easiest ways to control property is through means of using what we call a mandate agreement. Now, a mandate agreement is the exact same contract that estate agents use. Now, what that usually does, just as a summary, is it usually gives you between 8, it can be anything. You can vary it. It can start with 2 days, but usually, typically, most estate agents are controlling your property for around the region of 8 to 12 weeks. Now, the reason that I say controlling your property is because a mandate agreement, an exclusive mandate agreement, gives that estate agent or gives that proprietor or that person basically the legal control to be able to sell and offer your property to other people for that series of time or that period of time, which is actually documented in the mandate agreement. So if you're on an 8-week mandate agreement, for 8 weeks, the estate agents have the exclusive ability and legal right to market your property to other people. Now, is a mandate agreement the highest level of control? The answer is no. Okay, a mandate agreement doesn't give you exclusive management rights. It doesn't allow you to manage that property. It doesn't allow you to start refurbishing that property, etc., etc., etc. There's a whole myriad of different documents that you'd use for those things, which we're not probably going to get into in this live show. But again, if it's a question, it will end up being an answer. So the first one is a mandate agreement. Why use a mandate agreement? Because they're probably quite readily available in the sense that estate agents are in their drones. They're in their thousands and hundreds of thousands across the UK. So because there are so many estate agents, it's very, very simple to be able to engage an estate agent, whether it's through means of you selling your own property. And because you're selling your property, you start speaking to an estate agent. When you start speaking to an estate agent, they provide a mandate agreement for you. You get a copy, you decide to edit it, make it how you want to make it, and then start using it. Now, beware, okay? And I said today's show is all about due diligence. Please beware. When I say beware, what I mean is be mindful that when you start doctoring people's documents, you don't end up with the same legalities, the same protection that original document has. Now, what do I mean? Has an estate agent got protection when they create a document? If that estate agent has had that document created by a legal entity, such as a solicitor's firm, such as a legal practitioner, then the legal practitioner who's provided that document also comes with them some level of public liability insurance, some professional indemnity insurance. So it's that insurance that this particular legal practitioner has, which is kind of linked with the documents they produce. So what that basically means is if I have a solicitor who produces a document for me, if that document doesn't end up being fit, if that document doesn't end up, producing what it was supposed to produce as a result, if, for example, someone turns around tomorrow and says, oh no, I'm not going to allow you to sell my house up until week 8. I'm only going to allow you to sell my house up until week 6, when we've both signed a legally binding document. And then I end up in a position where I'm taking this person to court saying, hold on a minute, I had 2 more weeks and this person went behind my back and sold the property and hasn't given me a remuneration. Then I could then be in a position where I can go and sue my solicitor. And the reason I can sue them is because, or I can make a claim on their insurance because of the fact that they're insured for this purpose. Okay, so that's one of the important things. When we go through each of these 3 documents from the mandate all the way to the last one I'm going to share, I want you guys to understand that having somebody who's covered by a appropriate legal cover or by an appropriate insurance policy is essential, in my opinion, to when you get someone to write up your contract. And this is one of the reasons why, when I do any coaching, when I do any advisory or consultancy, I don't go out of my way and start providing documents. There's a lot of people out there who do provide documents. There's a lot of property coaches or property trainers that say, yeah, if you jump on my training, I'll give you all the paperwork. The problem is they can give you the paperwork because they know there's no protection on that paperwork. If you go through a deal and that deal doesn't go the right way, you can't go back to that trainer and say, I'm going to sue you because your document wasn't appropriate, because they tell you it's a template or they tell you it's something else which basically makes them indemnified from the issue. Whereas when you deal with a solicitor who drafts that contract for you, creates that contract for you, is something completely different. And that's just something I want people to be really mindful of before we even go any further in this regard. So the first thing is, make sure when you are getting documents drafted or created for you, that those documents are being drafted by the appropriate people, which again, we're going to come on to after I give you the 3 examples, just to make sure that you're covered, covered on all bases. So that's the first thing. So the first one, mandate agreement. Second one, you could use what we call a lockout agreement. Now, a lockout agreement is slightly different to a mandate agreement in the sense that a lockout agreement legally stipulates that you are now the primary person who's in the running to purchase this property. And as a direct result, any other person who has any, financial interest in this property has to deal with you. So a lockout agreement locks out, technically, every other person from being able to buy that property at that time. So this is one of the reasons why a lockout agreement is essential. All right. And thank you for the comment. I've got London's happiest bus driver. He's written here, this makes absolute sense. So most welcome to you. But yeah, that's the secondary thing. So when you start thinking about a lockout agreement, the key with a lockout agreement is a lockout agreement stops any other person from having the opportunity to buy before you. So a lockout agreement is a secondary document that's also used. So the first one, mandate agreement, comes traditionally from an estate agent. Second one, a lockout agreement. Now the third one is one which you hear a lot of property people talk about, but not many property people have actually used, is a option agreement. Okay, or if I say the one that they mostly speak about, because most people don't speak about option agreements, even though option agreements are very, very powerful things. Again, option agreements is something I speak to a lot of my coaching clients about and people that I spend time with training in different ways. But the agreement that most people do talk about in the property space is the lease option agreement, okay, which is slightly different to an option agreement. Please do not get them confused. Don't assume that they're the same thing, because they're not the same thing. There is a slight difference. But the lease option agreement is an agreement which a lot of the time is spoken about or bandied around. Now, personally, I would use a lease option agreement to control a property that I want to make sure that the seller does not go and sell to someone else. However, it's not always the first point of call for me. And the reason why is because if I'm going to go out of my way to get a lease option drawn up, and anyone who's ever done a lease option, if you're in the comments, feel free to say, oh, I've done a lease option before. But if you've ever done a lease option, one of the things you realize is your solicitor, if you're getting the solicitor to draft it, which you're supposed to, the solicitor will say to you, if they're a smart solicitor and they're comfortable with option or lease option agreements, they'd say to you, are you putting in place the management rights also? And what that basically means is you now have to pay an additional fee for management contracts to be drafted up and drawn up, because that is an embedded part of a lease option. Part of a lease option agreement is for you to take on the full legal management of that property, or the pseudo management, if I put it that way. And you can't do that properly unless you have a legal document which stipulates you're doing that, which would then be a variation or a type of management agreement. So the key is you need your management agreement in place as well as your lease option agreement in place in order to go with a lease option. So they're the 3 that I'll share with you. First one being a mandate agreement, second one being a lockout agreement, third one being the lease option, which many people speak about. So I'll share that with you in that regard as well. But again, few technicalities, few things to be aware of. First and foremost, if you're going for the lease option, you will be expected from any solicitor who's worth their salt for you to also additionally produce a management agreement to play part of that option agreement, that lease option agreement. And then side by side with that, the main thing, going to Yogesh's second part of the question, you should get someone who's covered. Now, to answer the second part of Yogesh's question in a more expansive fashion. Yogesh has asked, who do you go to? Where do you go? Okay. The reality is, if you were buying a property, you'd go for a process which we call conveyancing. Okay. Now, the conveyancing process is a legal process, but you don't have to have a solicitor to do your conveyancing for you. You can have any human being who knows how to basically do the paperwork for conveyancing to do a conveyancing. That's one thing many people do not know, but that is actually the truth. Now, the second thing is, because when you're buying a property, you go through a conveyancing process. When you are controlling a property, the same way that you should go through a process like conveyancing to buy, you should go through a legal process to control. Okay, so whether that's on a low scale of a sourcing approach, or whether it's a more technical scale of someone who's controlling a property for their own means, whether it be through rent to rent, whether it be through a lease option, whether it be through something more savvy, you should have a legal practitioner who provides the documentation for you, who drafts the documentation for you, who works with you on the drafting of the documentation and the production of those documentations. That is my strongest belief. That's the way I've done it. That's the way I advocate and encourage people to do it. Now, in terms of the part of the question Yogesh has asked about who do you go to, self-explanatory. Go find a solicitor who knows what they're doing, who potentially 9 times out of 10 has done it before. Okay, you don't really want someone who's a newbie on something like this, because if you're trying to control a property worth, I'll give an example. One of the properties in our portfolio I was at today, this property is worth around circa 800,000 pounds. If a solicitor is doing a document for the first time, drafting a contract on that property, that's a lot of money to play with. That's a lot of equity to play with. That's a lot of cash flow to play with. That's not the kind of thing you want to do lightly. So I would advise you, if you are going to go ahead, go find someone who's done it before, get them to draft the contracts for you. So who'd you go and see? Specialist property solicitor, specialist property lawyer. And what you request from them, you basically say to them, look, can you please provide me documentation for me to X, Y, and Z? And obviously you have to articulate to them what you're trying to achieve, what you're doing. If you know the terminology, share with them the terminology. If they know the terminology, which they should, they'll be able to get the documents drafted. Is that helpful, Yogesh?
Yeah. I mean, the following question would be, how do you find people who know what they have done this before, obviously, but that's quite expensive to do that step, but that is the only way to secure the property properly, isn't it, really?
Not the only way, but the best way. Like, again, it's like saying, how'd you get your son to become a professional footballer? There's going to be several ways, but there's going to be kind of the mainstream approach. And the mainstream approach might be, well, when your child's 5, 6, you want to get them into a football academy. When they're 15, 16, they might be getting scouted, etc. So there's going to be a predominant route for most people. And if you understand that predominant route, you can take advantage of it. So I would say to you, no, it's not the only way to control the property. You can control the property with a piece of paper. This is where the presentation idea came from. You can take a piece of paper, you can write on here, I, Samuel Ikimwin, will control this property for X amount of time, under these statutes, and you as the seller or the current owner can contribute and agree to all of the above. Sign here, sign here. You can control property any way you want, and the legally binding way is through means of some form of an agreement. And the moment you've got a piece of paper, you've got a contractual agreement, you've signed it, they've signed it, that's the weight of legality. Okay, but the reality is, when you go outside of that and you say, well, the individual I'm dealing with has sought independent legal advice, I have sought independent legal advice, and we're both deciding to sign this contract, which was drafted by a legal practitioner, a professional legal practitioner. Bear in mind, all 3 of these legal entities I've just mentioned have their own professional indemnity insurance, public liability, etc. Then that's completely different to having a piece of paper which I drafted up and said, sign this, and I've signed it. What would hold up in a court of law is kind of what you really need to think about. So when you have other sources coming around saying, oh, I've got the same deal, or other investors saying, oh, I'm going to take your deal off you, or when you secure a property and then you have the fear, because I work with a lot of people who are starting out in their sourcing business. uh, uh, a lot of the people I work with have been very successful in their property investing business, but they're now shifting to the next level of trying to add different bows to their string, different strings to their bow. Apologies. So for a number of the people that I work with in terms of a coaching capacity, they've already got portfolios, but they're now looking at, okay, how can I make money off the deals I don't want? How can I make money off, the contacts I have, etc. So this is a lot of what I end up doing in terms of my coaching, supporting them to overcome limiting beliefs, work with people, give them contacts, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, for people who are in that space, who have already done stuff in property, when they think to themselves, there's always usually a fear for them around sharing deals with other people. The moment they find a great deal, there's an apprehension around, can I really let another investor who's like me have a look at this? Because if I do, they could take it for themselves. And the thing to remember is, it's all about what you put in place. So if, for example, you put in place a piece of paper that you've basically drafted, you're not really going to overcome that fear. You're still going to be concerned. You're still going to be worried, maybe someone could steal the deal from me. Whereas if you've got solicitors involved, if you've paid money, if sometimes even the current owner has paid money, when people have started to part with things, that's when the game changing starts. That's when the person, even if someone did approach them, they'd be like, you know what, I wouldn't, I've signed a document, and that document's legally binding. Excuse me. So that's what I'd say to you in that regard, Yogesh. It's not the only way, but I would say I strongly believe it's the best way. Get legal help, get legal support involved, let them do the thing. Now, you've asked a question, an additional question, so I'll give you some insights on that. So the additional question Yogesh has asked is, well, what do we do in order to find these people, these legal practitioners? And, I say this a lot, but I'll say it again. Look for referrals. That's one thing I'll definitely say. Look for referrals. Ask yourself, who out there is actually doing this strategy? Who's a good person to speak to about the strategy? And then, whatever it is, take the person for lunch, take the person for dinner, take the person for whatever. What's everybody doing now? Coffee, Zooms. Take them for some kind of a meeting. If they've got a service where you can get some consultancy or coaching from them, get some coaching from them, and just basically find out, do you have a contact you could refer to me? Do you have a person that I could utilize? Because the power of having someone in your power team, I'll share this with you guys for you guys to see exactly what I'm talking about. This is something. This is one of the resources I created before, called Team 10. Okay, and it says at the bottom, discover your property power team. This resource was created just to help people understand the key players they need in their property power team. Now, why am I showing this resource? I'm showing this resource because I feel as though a lot of people who've been doing property conventionally seriously underestimate the value of just one of those 10 key players. So many people in the property space don't value having a power team. And the reality is, a power team is what will change your property investing from one property acquisition a year to 3, 4, 10, 12. Okay. You can't do that on your own, but you can do that with a power team. You can do that with a solicitor, a broker. I could go through the whole 10, but you can do that having a seriously switched on power team who understand and get your vision, and who you can definitely get along with through means of your values, etc., etc. Now, the reason I share that is because I want you to understand, especially from Yogesh's question, those of you who are watching this, that if you invest to go and build up a power team, that is going to pay you back for years. That's going to pay you back for decades. Potentially, that could actually pay you back for generations. When you're gone, you could have your children or your children's children benefiting, reaping the rewards of the fact that you built a successful property power team. Maybe because of some of the assets you ended up buying, some of the assets you ended up controlling, some of the assets you ended up passing down, and the way you also ended up passing them on to the next generation. So the point I'm making is, there is a depth of value that you can get, that we will get, that any person gets when they build a successful property power team. So I would say, go out there, invest in the connections, and go build a power team. So that's what I'd say to you, Yogesh, in that regard. Yeah. And guys, for those of you who are watching this, phone lines open, numbers right there. Feel free to use the telephone number and access code. If you have property questions, you can call in and ask your questions. So did that really answer your question, Yogesh?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I mean, I totally agree with the network thing, because That is exactly what I'm doing myself.
Yep.
I
Yep.
agree with that message, 100%. So I think in summary, what you're saying is talk to people, find a solicitor who knows about option agreements,
Yep.
done them before,
Lease option agreements specifically.
lease option agreements,
Yeah.
and then I should get a quite solid agreement. Okay,
Yeah.
brilliant. Thank you so much.
Definitely. Most welcome, Yogesh. Great to have you on again, and always a pleasure to hear your questions as well. Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
No worries.
So much. If you have time for another question, come back to me.
All right. Good stuff. Good stuff. Love that. Okay. Excellent. So that was Yogesh, guys. Thank you, Yogesh, for calling in. So Yogesh said if we have time for other questions, we should come back to him. So I definitely will do that if we get a moment. Happy to do that, definitely. All right. So with that being said, let's jump into the article. And then after we do the article, if we have a moment or two, we'll come back to Yogesh again and see if we can take any more questions from him. But like I said, guys, look, 100%. If you have property questions, feel free to call in. You've got the telephone number straight under the screen right there on the banner. And also you've got the access code, telephone number 0330 606 0403. You can call in, ask your questions, just use the access code in order for you to get your questions answered. 695 922 is the access code. All right, so we are back on the article of news. Okay, so again, just to refresh everybody with the headline. Okay, and not only refresh you with the headline, I'm going to do something even more interesting. I'm going to just read through the article so you guys can start to see exactly what this thing is saying, what it's kind of predicting, what it's saying is going to take place. And I won't read through all of it, but I'll get a good gist of it. All right, it says here, house builders threatened with court action over leasehold scandal after watchdog finds troubling evidence of mis-selling. Okay, now here's kind of the brunt of the article, which I'm going to go through just so you guys can know exactly what's going on in this regard, and then I'll kind of share with you guys what my thoughts are around it. So let me try and bring it up so I can just basically make sure I can get a good read through it rather than read it with real small text. Okay, brilliant, got it here. Okay, so subheading on the article, just to start with, so you guys can start to get a flavor of exactly what was purported. So it says, it's unacceptable for housing developers to mislead or take advantage of home buyers, says Competition and Markets Authority. Now, the Competition and Markets Authority is basically one of the watchdogs for developers, people that are engaging in any kind of any sales anyway, really. So it says this is the actual article itself, 4 of the UK's biggest house builders could face court action by the competition watchdog over troubling evidence, in quotations, that they mistreated buyers of leasehold properties. So predominantly, not exclusively, but predominantly this is going to be people who have bought new build flats and flats in general. It says the Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, has launched enforcement action against Into Barrett Developments, Countryside Properties, Permission Homes, and Taylor Wimpey's, and they are actually the 4 biggest, like on paper, 4 biggest property developers or development companies in the UK. It goes on to say the regulator wrote to the developers demanding evidence about the leasehold scandal and said it may take them to court if they do not change the way they do business. Buyers may have been unwittingly trapped into ground rents that double every year, leading to huge bills, the CMA said. It is unacceptable for housing developers, again, this is the quote that was up top, to mislead, take advantage of home buyers. That's why they've launched today's enforcement action, said CMA boss Andrea Coselli. Now, the interesting thing is this was released on a number of different sites. So if you even just Google the story, you'll find it on a number of different sites. And this goes back to what I said, the main theme of the show is tonight. You need to do your due diligence. And the reason why is because if you think about this, the biggest house builders in the UK, most people would assume instinctively that they are going to do the right thing. Most people would instinctively assume, oh, of course they know what they're doing. Of course they're going to treat us right. Of course they're going to do what's supposed to be done. The reality is things don't necessarily work like that always. Okay. And this is one of the reasons why in one of our previous shows, I spent a lot of time sharing with us that what we need to do, what we need to make sure that we do as investors is make sure that we're the kind of people who are doing our due diligence. We need to make sure that we're checking things out. We're going the extra mile. We're not just taking what people say to us and thinking, okay, that must be the truth, because a lot of the time things are not always necessarily what they seem. And the only reason and the only way that you're going to basically be able to find out if things are or are not what they seem is when you get to a position where you start to realize, you know what, I want to check this out for myself. You know, I don't want to be fooled. I don't want to be bamboozled. I don't want to be that person. Okay. So I'm going to read a bit more of the article, give you guys a bit more insight into some of the things that were being shared. So let me jump into the actual website because that will be more helpful. Okay. If this is going to work, if the ad blocker is not going to stop us. Excellent. So we should be in now. The joys of technology, guys. Okay, it's taking a bit of while in order for us to actually get the access to the site itself, which is weird. Or is it work now? Yes, it looks like it's just let us in. All right, so read this part already. Excellent. So let's look at this part. It says everyone involved in selling leasehold homes should take note. If their investigation demonstrates that there has been mis-selling or unfair contract terms, these will not be tolerated. Now, the reason why this is important, okay, the reason why this is so important for all of us as property investors is two things I'm going to share with you. The first is for the last 12 years, probably very strongly for the last 10 years, there's been a lot of property training companies that partner with property developers. A lot of the time, they're not necessarily partnering with property developers as large as the big four that we've just mentioned, but a lot of the time they are actually partnering with property developers. Now, why is that significant? The reason it's significant is because you could go to a property training program and be told through the property training program, oh, we've got a connection to a developer who's producing new builds, and we want you to come and buy some of them because they're great deals. We've secured great deals for people on our training program. Now, why is this a bit challenging? The reason it's a bit challenging is because there's a slight conflict of interest there. Okay, and one of the challenges you have to make sure that you kind of overcome is, again, the focus of today's show, doing your due diligence. Now, unfortunately, what happens for many human beings is we become subjective around doing our due diligence when we feel as though someone who we trust is telling us to actually get involved or get engaged in a particular deal. So, for example, if you've paid someone, you know, £8,000, £20,000, £100,000 for some property training, and they turn around and tell you, look, we got these two new, off-plan development flats which you can pick up at a steal. They should be worth 100,000 when they're finished, but you know, or they won't tell you that. They'll say they're gonna be worth 100,000 when they're finished, but you can grab them for 70k each. The problem with that, there's, you know, I've already got my views on new builds and off plan, and those of you who know me know those views anyway, but just to be really clear with you guys, the problem with that is because it's someone you trust, someone you've invested in, who's now giving you this advice, sometimes you can actually be blindsided and not go and do your own appropriate due diligence. So what I want you guys to make sure you do is do your due diligence, regardless of who brings you something. Just check it out. Just say to yourself, what if, okay? Then the reason I'm sharing that with you is because you can see here that the CMA are directly quoting that this is not just about the big four. They're saying this affects everyone involved in selling leasehold properties. So if you are a small developer, if you're buying a big house and chopping it up into 3 flats and then selling those 3 flats on, this involves you. This relates to you. So that's the first way, people that are actively doing these developments, building these stuff out. The second people it actually really affects, and it's not only the people that are buying, but the people that are going to be developing these, okay? So if, for example, you're like myself, and you're the kind of person who's looking at buying blocks and basically turning commercial buildings into residential buildings, or taking a commercial building and chopping it up into multiple flats. You have to be mindful. Okay, you have to be mindful that the units you're creating are going to be units with appropriate leases, because right now they're looking to make examples of people who are not doing it properly. Let's go a bit further into the article for you guys to get a bit more of a gist. It says a freeholder owns both the house and the land it is on, while a leaseholder basically rents the property for a fixed period, sometimes centuries. And this is, because a lot of the people that are now offering leasehold agreements are putting 1,000-year leases. So again, this is part of the reason why that happens. It says the watchdog said it was taking action over the misleading of leaseholds. It said that developers had not clearly explained what ground rent is and whether it increases over time to some buyers. Now here's the bit I just wanted to share with you guys as I wrap it up on here. It says when buying a leasehold rather than a freehold, buyers often have to pay a ground rent to the person or company who owns the freehold on the site. But when potential buyers asked if they could become the freeholder, some were told that the properties on an estate were only available as leasehold homes. And this includes houses, guys. This is not just flats. There's a lot of houses over the last 7 to 10 years which have been sold with leasehold agreements rather than freehold agreements. Please bear this in mind. It says homes on the same estates were later sold as freeholds to other buyers, the CMA said. So you can see here, if this is the kind of stuff that's actually taking place with the biggest developers, imagine what could be taking place with smaller developers. And this is kind of the mindset of the CMA, which is why they're saying, look, we're on the lookout, we're on the prowl, we don't want people doing this, and if we find out people are doing this, we're going to shut them down. And it's not just about the big four. So guys, I want you to be mindful of that. I don't want you to be caught in this crossfire, which they've basically got, because you need to be the kind of person who's actually looking ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to do my due diligence. I listened to what Samuel said on that show. If I'm going to do a development, if I'm going to buy, first and foremost, for the smaller investors, if I'm going to buy a flat, I'm going to make sure I check out the paperwork. What's one of the ways you can check out the paperwork? Hire an appropriate solicitor, hire an appropriate legal professional who can look at the work, who can look at that document. I think the last flat I bought was in 2017. When I bought that flat, I asked a solicitor to look over the lease, look over the paperwork. If there's anything that is untoward, anything that doesn't make sense, anything that shouldn't be there, let me know. Just flag it with me. Let me have an understanding of it so I can then look into it and decide what I want to do about that. So guys, I want to share the same thing with you. Please, please, please be the people doing your due diligence. Let's be the people that get it right. Let's not be the people making the mistakes. Now, with that being said, let's jump into the chat, see what everybody's saying in the chat. And again, just a reminder, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Feel free to hit the like, and also feel free to share this video with people in the community so you can let YouTube and those people know that you are getting value from what we're doing here. All right, so jumping into the comments, we've got here, okay, Yogesh has said, really great answer to his questions. Thanks so much. Most welcome, Yogesh. Sister Nana said here, this is interesting stuff. Thank you for your comment, Nana. We've got here, what else? Okay, Yogesh says, yes, you can't assume everyone does things the right way, no matter who they are. And that is totally true. And this is the way to kind of be foolproof. All you do is just check. Okay, it's not saying, oh, I trust this person less. It's not saying I don't like this person. It's not saying I don't trust this person. It's just checking. And there's nothing wrong with checking. Okay, you go and buy some fruit. I hope you check the fruit. Okay, because too many times you might have been the person who's bought the fruit, got home, seen that the fruit is got some issue, and you're like, oh, why did I buy the fruit? Guys, let's just not be those people. That's all I'm saying. Okay, let's be the people who check the fruit, who make sure that, you know what, this is exactly what I wanted it to be, or it's even a bit better. You know what, I'll take it. So that's one thing I would add on that. Okay, can't assume everyone does things the right way. Cool. And a bit of banter between a couple of the people in the chat. All right, cool. Okay, so Yogesh said, if I end up using them, I'm not sure what you're talking about with that regard, Yogesh, but do please let us know. We've also got Osa, who's written here, great answers and informative. Thank you ever so much. Appreciate it. Yogesh has said here, so glad you do this. Everyone, you should tell everyone about this such great advice. Call him. Yeah, and I agree. Guys, I don't feel as though enough people take advantage of the opportunity to call in. But again, guys, this is the way things work. So Yogesh said, if I use recommended solicitors, I'll pay them a referral fee. And I think that's a great idea as well. I think if you do use people, why not pay referral fees? Why not have that embedded? And you know what? One of the things I do at times is sometimes I use affiliate links, whether it's, different resources that we have a connection with the people that are selling those resources. Sometimes we use affiliate links. Now, the great thing about being an affiliate for somebody is that, yes, you're not getting that person charged more, the client who ends up using them, but you still have an opportunity to potentially make a revenue as well. So I want to encourage people, like, if you've got good contacts, then why not pay referral fees? Why not connect other people with them? And why not, we call it the law of reciprocity. Like, why not share the value you get with other people? So very quickly, I'm going to come back to the phone line. So if Yogesh is still on, or if we've got any other new callers, I will check that in a moment. But I want to let you guys know about our key resource for today's show. So again, those of you who are tuning in tonight, if you have not been on the show before, you will not know that we offer a key resource every single show. The key resource for today is the Rich Dad Poor Dad audio book. Now, I believe most people I've met have read this book or listened to this book. If you haven't read this book or listened to this book, I want to encourage you to go and get a copy of this. And you can do that by going to the link right here, which is www.impactproperties.co.uk/rich dad. Okay, very simple. Impactproperties.co.uk/rich dad. Now, if you go to that link, you will get this audiobook basically absolutely free. Okay, you get a free trial with Audible for 30 days. You get the book absolutely free included in your trial. And if you decide that you don't want to be on Audible and you don't want to have the subscription to Audible, which is roughly around £8 a month, you can cancel the subscription, but you keep the book. Okay, so go and get yourself a copy of Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a classic book which every single person should at least listen to or read. I think probably better to read, but at least listen to or read in their lifetime. It's a great book helping you understand about good debt, bad debt, etc., investment, etc., etc., etc. So Yogesh has said here, fantastic book, Rich Dad and Poor Dad, changes your life, should be taught in schools. And I totally agree with that too. I believe a lot of the central tenets in Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, should be taught in schools. And this is one of the reasons why we're actually making the book available as our key resource today, because the theme of today's show is do your due diligence. And if you're doing your due diligence, the Rich Dad Poor Dad book is kind of like, it's a kind of resource that will help you understand what we're talking about when we're saying do your due diligence. Because in that book, one of the things Robert Kiyosaki talks about is people getting to a place in their life where they start to understand how to measure an investment. Is this a good investment? Is this a bad investment? What makes a good investment for me? What makes a bad investment for me? Etc., etc., etc. So if you haven't read this book before, if you haven't listened to this book, go get Rich Dad Poor Dad. You can use the link on the screen, www.impactproperties.co.uk/rich dad, and you'll go and get a free copy of that on Audible. So value, value, value being shared. Let's jump into the phone line again. Let's see if anyone else is on or if Yogesh is still on. I can see Yogesh is still here. We don't have anyone else on. So I'm going to take Yogesh, another question from Yogesh, if he's still there. Hey, Yogesh. Excellent, excellent. Fantastic. I like that, Yogesh. Empowering. That's very empowering and encouraging. So, Yogesh, what's your next question? You said you had another question if you had time.
Agreed, to make sure it's actually done properly with all the right regulations, certificates. Someone who can handle all of that headache and is experienced in doing it. How do you find? Because I think they're worth their weight in gold. Hopefully, you pay them in the end.
They might even save you more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think people who try and do their own bills, these managers, unless they know what they're doing, are missing a trick. That's my question.
Well, I totally agree with you. So for those of you who didn't hear Yogesh's question, I think the audio's all set up, so I think everyone can hear Yogesh's question. But Yogesh's question quite simply was, what do you do and how do you go around finding people? Actually, I forgot to unmute you, so I apologize. So maybe they didn't hear you. But basically, Yogesh's question, if you guys didn't hear Yogesh, was basically how do you go around finding an appropriate project manager or build team in order to manage your developments or in order to manage your refurbs, because what Yogesh was basically saying is he believes those people, those key influential people, can be worth their weight in gold, and they will end up potentially saving you all the money you invest in working with them. And one of the things I shared with Yogesh, or you guys would have heard me say, is I think in many cases they'll actually save you more money. And the reason is because, you know, for some people property is a fly by night game. It's like, okay, I'm going to do one and I'll never do another one again. But for those people who are, you know, seriously invested in property, those people that are going to do a project next 2 years, they're going to try and do another project. Next 2 years, they're going to do another project. Or those people that are more aggressive about it, people that are doing multiple projects per year, whichever scale you're at, whichever side of the spectrum you're at, the reality is the staff that you bring on, the team that you bring on, again, going back to the resource I spoke about earlier, Team 10, the people you bring on makes a massive difference. And the reason it makes a massive difference is because, just as Yoga said, they do become worth their weight in gold. They do become the people that are helping you achieve things you couldn't achieve on your own, okay? And again, this just reminds me as I'm sharing about a principle which was, I first heard this principle from John Maxwell. So again, John Maxwell is a leadership expert who's been teaching on leadership for over 30 years. He has over 60 books on leadership. And one of the principles he teaches is the law of significance. And he says in the law of significance that the number one is not significant in and of itself. And he basically breaks down that no one can achieve anything of significance in and of on their own. So the reason this is really important to me, thinking about what Yogesh is saying, is the fact that if you want to be successful in your property journey, one of the first things you need to do is create a team. If you take the two themes we're kind of really talking about a lot on today's show, due diligence and then creating a team, the powerful thing about that is if you do your due diligence and develop a team early, you don't have to recreate your team ever again. So this goes back to the point I was making on Yogesh's earlier question when I was saying when you get the right people around you, these people effectively can provide value for you for generations, for years on, years in, years out, and keep going. So these are things to just think about, keep in your mind and understand. So coming to the crux of Yogesh's question, how do you find these people? Now, one of the ways to find people, I'm a big advocate of this. Those of you who know, I used to host a networking event, over 100 people showing every single month. Is networking. Like, networking is kind of the key. That's my big thing. I always advocate networking. One of the greatest places you can go to network currently in the UK is the Property Investors Network, PIN. Okay, the PIN environment. PIN is effectively the largest property investors networking organization in the UK, which is one of the reasons why I advocate them, because they have over 50 meetings across the UK. So you can go to Milton Keynes, you can go to Sheffield or just outside of Sheffield, you can go to wherever it is, you can go there. Up north, they've got the Great North Property Meet. You can go to London, there's 5 London PIN meetings. You can go to anywhere within the UK, you name the place, and 9 times out of 10 there's most likely a PIN meeting there or close, and you'd be able to access that PIN meeting and meet other people that are interested in property or actively doing property. So that's one thing I'd say to you. Consider networking and think about the different ways you can network. Now, due to the pandemic, due to the lockdown, due to a whole bunch of things, people have started to change how they're doing things. So what I'd encourage you is to start to tap into the online communities that you can tap into, and don't tap into these communities looking for the person. Tap into these communities looking for people who can recommend a person. Okay. So the big mistake a lot of people do, and I speak about this all the time, one of my big principles that I was taught at the age of 19 by a coach. A coach said to me when I was 19, Samuel, don't search for answers. Most people search for answers. You should search for questions. And the reason I share that with people all the time is because when we're talking about finding the right project manager or finding the right build team, what most people would do is go out of their way to look for the project manager or look for the build team. What I would advocate is, rather than looking for a project manager, rather looking for a build team, go and look for people who have done projects successfully before and ask them who project managed their project. Go and look for people who have done good builds before and ask them who managed the build. Because what you're doing now is you're not getting the person telling you their sales pitch. Now they will tell you their sales pitch because you've got to sell. If you have a business, you have to sell. That's part of having a business. But you're not going to hear their sales pitch until after you've already heard an independent person who's utilized them sales pitch. And that for me is the key. So I'd encourage a lot of people, go out there, go networking, tap into online portals, meetup.co.uk if that's the website, or the meetup website. There's Just Tickets. Just Tickets is a website which runs events. There's so many different portals where you can find events. Now when you go on those portals, next thing you need to do on those portals is start looking for the property events. Then when you find the property events, usually at the scale or level that you're invested in property, then you start asking people for referrals. Who's the best person you've ever met who does carpentry? Who's the best person you've ever met who does plumbing? Who's the best person you've ever met who can fit an ensuite, etc., etc., etc. And by you doing that, what you do is you create a scenario now where basically you might have 3 or 4 people recommending the same person. That's definitely someone you want to go and see. Okay. Or 1 or 2 people talking about, oh yeah, I had this guy do my electrics. Oh, I had this guy do a rewire, but they're saying the same name. Okay. If I'm in this area, this location, or if I got a property in that location, that's the guy I want to go and see. So that's what I'd say in terms of what you can do. Excellent. So Yogesh has written quite a few questions in the chat. He said, do you believe in the law of attraction? I don't actually believe in the law of attraction as it's spoken about today. The law of attraction in today's world has become a personal development framework which people are talking about, but I don't believe in it in that kind of framework. Okay, but I do believe that we reap what we sow. That's something that's taught in the Bible, and everyone who knows me knows I'm an avid reader of the Bible, and it teaches that principle. It says you reap what you sow, and as you sow, so shall you reap. So I believe if you're putting certain things out there, you will get those things back, and that's the principle of you reap what you sow, which people now have turned into the law of attraction in a different way. So there's that. All right, Yogesh has said here, fantastic book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, changes lives, excellent. Okay, Yogesh has said, yeah, he recommends Pin 2, Property Investors Network. He's been to most in London, always meet great people, and those people have saved him thousands of pounds. Tell everyone what you are looking for. And I totally agree with that. And also Yogesh has said, I agree, find people who have done what you want to do, and I totally agree with that. London's happiest bus driver said his first time here, and Samuel, you do give a lot, and he's so appreciative of what you're doing. I have shared your YouTube on my social media and to my contacts because you're the real deal. Thank you. Most welcome, most welcome, most welcome. This is what we do. This is what we do, and like I said, I've got a goal for the YouTube channel. The current goal is 1,000 subscribers, which is close to 4 times where we're at right now, but that's cool because every journey starts with a step, and we're just trying to take that step. So thank you ever so much for your kind words. Thank you for your comments, and hit subscribe. Let people know that they should subscribe, be a part of what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep doing it because we know we've got value, and we know we're interested in sharing with people to help them move forward. So guys, with all of that being said, I've shared with you guys already our key resource, our key resource for this show, episode 21. Yes, episode 21. We've done 21 episodes right now, is the Rich Dad Poor Dad book on Audible. You can go and get that with a free trial at Audible. All you need to do is go to impactproperties.co.uk/Rich Dad. And as the admin have said, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I totally agree with them. Side by side with that, guys, if you haven't already, if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you need to go and get our free ebook. Okay, the Sourcing Blueprint is a free ebook. We created that ebook to help you understand how you can source properties for yourself and for other investors. And if you're interested in that ebook, all you need to do is go to the link www.sourcingblueprint.com. Side by side with that, go and register for our next up and coming webinar, which will take place on Monday at 8 p.m. And you can go to the link that's right there on the screen, www.impactproperties.co.uk/webinar. And that webinar will be me sharing with you all of the tips and tricks of how to take advantage in this current climate of property. Guys, I'm Samuel I Can Win. It's been a great pleasure to do the show tonight, and I look forward to seeing you guys moving forward in your property journey. Without further ado, have a great evening and happy investing.